Hey, welcome to Viking Preparedness. I am Pastor Joe Fox. Oi! So, just got done with our range time, which we do weekly. And I was thinking how many of y'all like stories. And my last story about the spider and the stick, I guess I could stretch hard and find some nuggets in that story that you could apply to your own situation. But this next story, you definitely can. Some of the brothers are still doing a little bit of shooting outside of the course of fire. Had a brother who had to zero a new rifle, and so he did that, and now it sounds like he's just playing a little bit. America. So, this story has to do about with you wanting to get very good at something. You wanting to be as good as that guy or that gal or those people. And what brought it to mind was shooting. And you know, a lot of people would love to shoot like a special operator shoots. Heck, I'd like to shoot like a special operator shoots. I've slipped a little bit, so that's why we're shooting now. Because it's not like riding a bike. You have to stay at it to stay sharp. But it could be you want to quilt like that person quilts, or you want to cook like that person cooks. Maybe cooking, probably still. We'll go with the major theme here. And as Americans, what we tend to do is focus on stuff. You know, we can just spend money on stuff and then we'll be better. Because, I have lots of examples on this line. I have a friend who is was an Olympic athlete. He went to the Rio de Janeiro Olympics, 400-meter hurdler. And I don't know, but I bet you his shoes probably cost $700, right, that he wore in the Olympics. And he had a deal with a company. They paid him to advertise their brand. And the deal was pretty ironclad. He could not be caught in any social media pictures anywhere wearing any brand other than their brand. And if he did, huge fine. So basically, he only wore their brand. But that's because it works. Because people see this guy, he's an Olympic athlete. He wears this brand. So if I wear that brand, I'll be good too. You know, golfing. For me to be a better golfer, I just need to buy clubs like that pro over there has, and I'll be a better golfer. When in fact, what you need to do is go to the driving range, go to the putting range, and maybe have an expert take a look at your swing, right? Pro. So my story is this. I was assigned for a little over a month to be a liaison officer to the Gurkhas. The Gurkhas came over and were training with the United States Army, and so I was their guy for a while, which was cool. I was in the infantry at the time. We were in Hawaii. And kind of the culminating exercise was about a 2-week exercise. And what they did is they took the Gurkhas, and it was a company, about 130, 150 guys. And they took them to the Big Island of Hawaii, which looks like the moon, the part we were on. Matter of fact, they tested the lunar Land Rover thing, you know, the dune buggy. They tested it in this training area that we were in. It just looks like the far side of the moon. And they told them, okay, here's your box on the map, big box, big open area, you know. Go find a place that you want to set up a company strong point. That's like a defense, right? An all-around defense with your 135 guys. We'll give you, it might have been a month out there. I don't know. I don't remember how long it was. We'll give you a few days to find it and dig in, build your position. And then what we're going to do, we're going to send 3 battalions against you, one at a time. And what they were going to do and what they did was they took an infantry battalion, which again, 500-700 guys. And they said, all right, somewhere in this box, there's an enemy position. You must find it and attack it. And so they infiltrated the box. They sent their scouts out. They found the position. They attacked it. And then, a day later, somebody else comes after them. And a day later, somebody else comes after them. And in every case, and they were just using blanks. Everybody was using blanks. And there were referees and umpires there and stuff. In every case, this company of 130, 150 guys destroyed the infantry battalion sent against them. And our doctrine is to attack a company-sized position, we'll use a battalion. 3 companies plus. And so doctrinally, it was a fine objective for these battalions. And they just kicked their butt. And at first, it was like, well, they're the Gurkhas, and the Gurkhas are the best in the world, and blah, 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 and the mystique, and yada, yada. And none of the 3 battalion commanders who had attacked this position and lost miserably even really fully comprehended what they'd gotten into, even when it was over. They didn't know what they dealt with. And so for the next month or so, I had to put together a briefing that kind of went in, and then deliver it. That went in 2 lines. One was, how did the Gurkhas actually set up their defensive position, and how did they defeat 3 separate of our battalions so handily? What lessons can we learn from that? And then 2, what lessons can we learn from the Gurkhas? What high-speed tips can we get from them so that we can be cool like the Gurkhas too? And I put the first briefing together, and I went and I gave it to the brigade. That's above the battalions. I gave it to the brigade commander in headquarters. He was a little disappointed in the answers, and he pushed me a little bit, and the answers were the answers. So then I went to the 3 different battalions separately, and I briefed them all. And I'm not going to get into their tactics, which were basically brilliant use of terrain. Was how they defeated our infantry battalion. That commander picked a really lovely piece of ground to defend on, and he was a master of his craft. But here's what made the Gurkhas better than us. Now, again, this was in the mid-1980s. We were a peacetime army. We had been for quite some time. My senior NCOs, sergeants, were all Vietnam vets, or at least Vietnam-era vets. Most of them were Vietnam vets. But, in my infantry company, that maybe 8 guys were Vietnam vets. Everybody else, peacetime army. And the urinalysis testing for drug use had just come out, so drugs were a real problem in the Army. Discipline was poor at that time. There was a lot of attitudinal troops back in the day for an all-volunteer Army. They were just really attitudinal. And so when I told them what made the Gurkhas so high speed, it took me driving it home and home and home and home again, and it was this. They did the basics perfectly. The Gurkhas did not do anything different from what U.S. Army doctrine was. The only difference between them and the U.S. Army was they actually did it. And I'll give you some examples. We have this thing called Stand To. And Stand To is basically for an hour to a half hour, it depends on the unit, before sunrise. The whole unit is in position, ready to fight. So all their stuff this is when they're in the field. All their stuff is packed up in their rucksacks. Every soldier is laying behind his rucksack, with his rifle pointed outwards. Everybody's alert and awake from a half hour before sunrise till a half hour after. Some units an hour before to an hour after. And in my experience at that time, you'd go walk around your perimeter at stand to, and this guy had gotten up from his position when it's over here, and this guy over here had gotten up and his position was over here. They were talking about the football game, and you're like, hey, get back in your position. And then you go find the squad leader, and you'd be like, hey, what are you doing? And then you find him with two other squad leaders playing cards. I mean, it was like that level of discipline. It's like, oh my God, it was just constant babysitting. And they just wouldn't do it. So when the Gurkhas were in stand to, their commander said to me, right, let's go check the positions. We're going to sneak up on them. So we snuck up on these positions where the Gurkhas were, laying behind fully packed rucksacks, on their rifle, both eyes open, staring straight ahead. The reason you do that is, don't sleep past dawn. That's when the French and Indians attack. It's because that's when a lot of attacks happen. And so if your whole unit is in a posture ready to fight, you're in a better position. The thing is, they all did it. When they went on a security patrol, they did a great security patrol. One time, the whole company of guys, we were moving cross country, and there was some pretty high grass. And they moved into the grass, and they did a circle, which is a technique. So now they're in a circular perimeter, and everybody gets down and faces out. And again, the American military did that at the time. American Army did that at the time. And, everybody's supposed to lay down, drop one shoulder of their rucksack, and point their rifles out. And you're like a little porcupine out there in the middle. Well, and then what would happen with American soldiers, they'd start joking, talking. One guy'd crawl over there. You'd have to tell him to go back. And it was just terrible. I know some of you guys in the later Army are like, why weren't the NCOs taking care of that? Because NCOs didn't do that back then. They just weren't that good, many of them. There were some awesome ones. I had some. But there were some terrible ones. And it's just how it was. And, they'd goof around and talk, and Walkmans would come out and stuff like that. And these Gurkhas, not only did they make their circle, everybody face out, they took the grass and they pulled the grass back up because it had squished down when they lay down. They pulled the grass back up over top themselves, and they laid there for about 2.5 hours and didn't bat an eyelid. Discipline. But again, they only did what we said to do. When I was in the 25th Infantry Division, that's what was in Hawaii at the time, we had a standard that if we stopped for 15 minutes, we started digging personal fighting positions. And if you were there long enough, you ended up digging a foxhole, armpit deep, and then when we moved, we had to fill them in. Except the only place we didn't do that was on the Big Island, because everybody knew you cannot dig in on the Big Island. It's just too rocky. So we never did. We just stacked a couple rocks up. Until the Gurkhas came and dug full-size fighting positions there. Oh yeah, they dug full-size fighting positions in that horrible conditions. And then after that, every time we went to the Big Island, we had to dig in too. Thanks, Gurkhas. But my point is, they didn't do anything high speed. They just focused on the basics. They focused on the fundamentals. And that's what's important, is to break a thing down to the fundamentals. And before you decide that you want to, throw 15 kettlebells around, do 6 pull-ups, do a 50-yard dash, then draw and shoot your weapon 5 times, maybe you should just be able to hit it standing there at first. Right? Focus on proper sign alignment, position, trigger control, breathing, all those things, right? Focus on the fundamentals. I have a video coming out soon on a book I'm reviewing by John Mosby on clandestine rifle, or I can't remember the exact title because this is not that advertisement. But it's basically rifle for preppers. And he focuses on the basics a lot. Now he also adds hoo-ha, interesting, cool guy stuff in there. But when I was in Special Forces, we all shot expert. I mean, that was the floor. Of course you shoot expert. Now let's make it harder and do things. But the reason we all shot expert was because we all focused on the fundamentals. Front sight press, front sight press. I mean, it's not magic, right? And so that's the lesson behind this Gurkha story. They were very good, and they kicked our butt. because they did what we said everybody should do. They knew the doctrine. Infantry doctrine is also not rocket science. It's just hard, and it sucks. It's not comfortable. It's pretty much the same thing with anything else. There's a right way to do things. Before you decide you know the cool guy way to do it and want to take a shortcut, maybe you should master the fundamentals. It's like CrossFit. I like learning new things. It's my personality. I just love learning a new thing. And when I started doing CrossFit, which I haven't been doing for years, but when I started doing it, I loved it because I was learning all this stuff. And I could lift X amount of weight over my head, from the ground to over my head, until my coach taught me how to actually do snatches. And it's like, oh, I could lift a lot more. And I hadn't gotten any stronger at that point. I had just learned the fundamentals of lifting, the techniques, and then you just apply them. Another thing we used to say in the Army, one of my bosses used to say, is good units do routine things routinely. Example, I have a new tractor. It comes with what we called in the military a -10 manual, like an owner-operator manual. And in it, it has daily checks. Check this, do a walk around, look at the tires, check the oil, do. And I just read that. I just said, oh, this looks like a -10 manual yesterday. And I've decided I'm going to force myself to do those daily checks every day. I'm telling you, most of them are stupid. Make sure that there's no cracks or tears in the hoses, blah, 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 blah. Well, our soldiers used to have to do that PMCS on the vehicles before they moved. And I remember when we had a new commander, and he said if they don't have the -10 manual in their hand while they're doing it, they're not doing a proper PMCS. And he was right, because you just start shortcutting things. You start taking things for granted. And you're like, I don't need to check for any dents or scratches. I mean, who cares? No, you start letting those little things slip and the big things slip. For the want of a nail, the Army was lost kind of thing. So I encourage you all, for whatever it is that you're pursuing, that before you decide you want to do it the high-speed way, high-speed, low-drag way, that you take time and master the fundamentals, and then keep going back to them and keep practicing those fundamentals, and you'll see the high-speed stuff just happen. All right, I'll see you out there.